The women's suffrage movement, the international protest in order to vote. This movement that captured the hearts of millions of young women all around the world, that people were willing to sacrifice their lives for, that had so many souls intertwined in the essence of making change. This truly was a special time, made possible only with sweat, blood, and sacrifice. A movement is nothing without people to support it. And we have to thank those who put aside what was easy and created change. We thank them with all our hearts for bearing the pain and hardship for our future generations, for being the vessel of selflessness and leading the world to a better path. With every ounce of blood in our body, we thank them. For if no one had been willing to sacrifice their personal desires and thrust us into the clutches of evolution, we'd be no better than a monkey who sits still and stubbornness, refusing to evolve, resulting in death. For it's people like Susan B. Anthony that shove us into the clutches of evolution and make humans human. In 1848, the Seneca Falls Convention was launched officially, starting off the movement. The convention was organized by Elizabeth Falls and Lucretia Mott. Many activists became famous and raised awareness for the movement. This helped advertise the cause of women's suffrage, making the right to vote a rallying cry. California was the first state to make changes to its laws based on the women's rights movement, and they did so in 1849, 1 year after the convention in Seneca Falls. In 1850, the first National Women's Rights Convention was held in Massachusetts. People from both the abolition and suffrage movements began to work together. In 1866, Elizabeth Stanton and Susan B. Anthony created the American Equal Rights Association. This association was made in an effort to protect the rights of all were to be treated equally. Just 2 years later, some of the first women to vote in America did so in New Jersey in 1868. Over 100 were able to cast a ballot. At this point in time, the women's suffrage was so widespread that an anti-suffrage group was created. Many in this group argued that women did not actually want the vote. Both men and women supported this movement as well. The creation of this group made it harder for progress to be made. In 1874, the 19th Amendment is created, pending 42 years to be ratified. The first national vote for women's suffrage is held, and the majority vote against it. A year later, in 1888, the National Council of Women is formed. They end up later supporting women's suffrage. In 1890, the National American Women's Suffrage Association is formed. In the 1900s, many American states began to adopt women's suffrage. Progress was made on an international level, and it appeared as if the time for national women's suffrage was coming. In 1916, the National Women's Party is formed. Alice Paul, the leader of the National Women's Party, is jailed and placed in solitary confinement to break her will and render her useless to the cause. When cruelty is imposed on a figure of high stature, people start to feel for them. And actions like these, instead of breaking the spirits of all, are exactly what rally them. The same thing happened in 1917, when protesters picketed and were arrested for up to 6 months. Many went on hunger strikes and were brutally force-fed. This angered many people, and there was a public outcry against the matter. The government decided to release the suffragettes to keep peace. In 1918, the current president, Woodrow Wilson, publicly supported the women's rights movement and addressed the Senate about the topic. The Senate decided to pass the 19th Amendment in 1919, and a year later it is ratified, ending the women's suffrage movement in the United States. Women are allowed to vote. We've went over the facts and information, but how does all this relate to the movement's change over time? In 1848, when the movement started, a very large percent were against the movement. But as generations went on and leaders came and went, the movement gradually gained support. Thanks to many of the organizations that formed and the people that made it up, as the movement progressed and gained supporters and losses, awareness grew, the same as the people did, becoming smarter and more insightful. Them realizing their own faults allowed the movement to be successful. The leaders grew to realize what worked and what didn't, like how hunger strikes rallied the public, and how militant suffragettes gained little support. proving that peaceful protesting is often more successful than riots and sabotaging. When the anti-suffragist movement began, even though they had been jailed, injured, and attacked, they said no such conduct to their adversaries. Instead of attacking them, they used diplomatic tactics to convince them. They learned from their past mistakes and changed their course of actions for the better. In the 1900s, people joined arms with the movement. It became a larger mainstream event. It was found in newspapers and the media normally. This transformed many people who previously resided in dormancy into people who supported the movement. This was a time for great change, and that favored the movement. As more and more states adopted the movement into their constitution, it made it so that other states felt pressured, like women's suffrage would be beneficial, and they convinced each other of what was right. In addition, groups like the National Women's Suffrage Association helped convince Woodrow Wilson to support the 19th Amendment. As the movement became so widespread, it became clear that a new amendment was necessary for everyday people. Many supported it, and in turn, the anti-suffrage party was defeated. They didn't have their way, and they could only delay the inevitable for so long. In 1920, when the 19th Amendment was ratified, the future was changed greatly, leading us onto the glorious path of success we still are on today. For if women had not won their rights, where would we be today? An unforeseeable future we choose to blind ourselves to, because the results may be too abstract to conceive, so frightening that even the wisest of all may choose to go without such decrepit thoughts. The rate of progress we have now rivaled to none of the previous periods of time. No age, no millennium, no centennial have ever compared to the rate of achievement which we have now. We as a species have grown, the way a reptile learned how to manipulate color, and what became known as a chameleon. Both men and women elevated us onto the platform of stature we are on now. As a species we pulled through, and it wouldn't be right if only men got to reap the rewards. In truth, justice is not a thing I believe in. It's not something that is often achieved, but that gives me no right to abandon it.